So I've gotten a lot of questions recently about the ACT math section specifically and how we can improve our strategy for this section of the test. So I figured I'd make a full training video breaking down exactly how to improve on the ACT math section no matter where we're starting out and what our target score is. So I've personally scored a 36 on the ACT math section probably a dozen times at this point. And over the last 6 years, I've helped thousands of students get to their dream scores on the entire ACT and also specifically on the math section. The ACT math section is notoriously one of the most difficult sections of not only just this test, but of all standardized tests out there, and it's known to cause a lot of problems for a lot of students. And if we don't have a good grasp on this math section, it's going to hold our overall score back from its potential, and we're not going to get into the best colleges, and we're not going to earn the maximum dollars of scholarships that we could be earning. So by the end of this video, you'll have a good plan in place for how you can specifically master the ACT math section, and we're going to get into a couple examples of the nitty-gritty details and how to improve on specific types of questions. So the most important thing with the math section, just like I say with all other sections and the entire ACT as a whole, is that we have to know what our baseline score is, and we also have to know what our target score is in order to lay out a plan for how we're going to get there. If we don't know where we're starting and where we're going, then it's going to be impossible to lay out a map to get from point A to point B. So that's why we need to start off with a baseline. For example, just the other day, I was working with a student to improve on the math section and lay out a plan to get to her target score. And when I first started picking her brain about how she felt about the math section overall, the first thing that she ever said was that she struggled really heavily with the questions at the end of that math section, like numbers 41 through 60, where those questions get really tough. So naturally, she wanted to work on those types of questions first, and that's exactly what she figured that we would be doing when we worked together. But her starting score on the math section was an 18. And really all we needed to do was get this 18 up to the mid-20s in order for her to get her target score on the overall test. So we were really just shooting to bring that 18 up to a 25. And when I dove into her diagnostic test, she had missed 20 out of the first 40 questions on the math section. So yes, she was definitely uncomfortable with those last 20 questions, numbers 41 through 60, but she was missing 20 questions out of the first 40 that she was thinking were these like easier questions and that she didn't really have a problem with. So instead of trying to lay out a plan to improve on those really tough questions at the end of the math section that everybody's uncomfortable with and that would probably take a lot of time to really learn those new concepts and learn all of those question types, I figured what we could do is just learn a couple of question types and really improve on those first 40 questions and stop leaking so many points. Because if she was just able to get, 35 out of those first 40 questions correct, then she would already be at her target score without even getting any of the last 20 questions correct. So even if she didn't get one question correct out of the last 20, she could get to her target score by not leaking so many points from the easy questions. I brought up the analogy of a leaky bucket, and that's why I keep saying that we were leaking too many points. Because if we compare gathering up points on the ACT to trying to fill up a bucket of water, she was trying to fill up a bucket of water by putting more water into it, but in reality, there was just a bunch of holes in the bottom of the bucket. So I said, let's just patch up these holes in the bottom of the bucket. Let's get some flex tape or some glue or just improve the bottom of our bucket, stop leaking out so many points. And then if and when we have a good, nice bucket, then we can increase the amount of water that goes into it. And that would be getting 35 out of the first 40 questions correct. And once we get there, if we still need to make more improvement, then we can work on those tough questions at the end of the math section that might take a little bit longer and might be just a little bit more time intensive to improve on. Now, of course, if you're starting at a 28 on the math section and you really need to improve to a 34, 35, 36, then that's where we would want to take a different approach. So of course, we need to have your baseline score and what your goal is in order to, of course, lay out this roadmap. And so once you have your target score in mind and you've already kind of mapped out a little bit of the strategy for how you're going to get there, now you need to identify your highest priority types of questions to work on for this math section, and then come up with a way to improve on those specific types of questions. And this is where it's going to be very individual to your situation. I can't cover every single question type right here in just one YouTube video, but I can give you a framework for how you can identify those and how you can start improving. So when you look at your diagnostic math section, you want to see what types of questions you're missing the most of and where you also think that you're spending more time than you probably should be, even on questions that you're getting correct. But you don't want to just stop there. You now have the questions that you're getting wrong and not having the most efficient process for. You also want to see what the most common questions that the ACT math section is asking and pair those two things together in order to find your highest priority question types. You don't want to just spend a ton of time learning how to solve a question type that only shows up like on 10% of ACT math sections, and you only have a 1 in 10 chance of even seeing one of those questions. You would probably want to prioritize the question types that show up on every single math section and show up like 4 or 5 times on each math section. And then once you identify those high priority question types for your specific situation, you want to come up with a way to, 1, recognize those question types, and 2, have the most efficient way of solving those question types so that you can recognize them on the test on your own and then have, again, the most efficient way to solve those. And now we'll head over to the whiteboard and I can show you exactly what I mean. So here we have a super common type of question on the math section. And this is a coordinate plane triangle type of question. And we know this because it has a triangle and it has a coordinate plane, and it gives us some of the points of the triangle in actual coordinate units. They don't give us the length of the triangle or anything like that. They just give us these coordinate units. And it tells us here we've got a coordinate plane triangle. Which of the following values is closest to the area in square coordinate units of triangle ABC? And so a lot of students will get kind of thrown off by this type of question because they don't just give us the base and the height like they would in a normal like math geometry class. So what we have to do is understand first off that area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. And importantly here, if I give an example on this example triangle, base and height are not just these fixed things. It does not necessarily have to be the bottom and like a line from the bottom to the top. Most people think that the only base is this, and then the only height is this measurement right here. But it's actually the same thing if we just do this as the base and then this as the height. The height is just a direct line from any of the base lines that we could pick. In this case, we picked this one as the base. Direct line from the base all the way to, I guess, the furthest point away from that base. And now we can make this make a little bit more sense maybe, but if we just rotate it on its side, right? Like if we had this, it might make a little bit more sense as to how this ended up becoming the base now that it's on the bottom versus when it was laying on its side. So we should just keep this in mind and be able to pick our own base depending on which one is the easiest measurement to find. So we don't necessarily have to try and pick like the bottom if it's going to be easier to pick one of the other sides. And so getting into this example, anytime that they have a coordinate plane question, there's always going to be one side that's a lot easier to find the length of than the other sides. If we try and find the length of AB, then we're going to have to figure out what the distance is between 0,6 and 5,2. I don't know about you, but I personally don't like using the distance formula. I hate the distance formula. It's very complicated and it's not fun to use. And there's really no reason we ever have to use it on the ACT math section. I've been able to get a 36 a bunch of times, never once have used the distance formula. So keep that in mind as well. Now, instead of trying to use that, what we could do is say that since these points B to C are stacked directly on top of each other, it will be a lot easier for us to find the distance between B, I guess the distance from B to C. So we say that this point B is 6 units up, and then this point C is 8 units down. So we've got this part is 6, this part is 8. That makes the entire distance of BC equal to 14. And then when we're finding the height of this triangle, we just draw the straight line from the base to the furthest point away, which in this case is A. So we draw this straight line, and we know that since we're going from the y-axis all the way out, we're going to the right by 5 units. Importantly, we're not going by 2 units because that's the y direction. That would be if we're going up. In this case, we're going from 0 to this 5 right here. That means that this unit is 5. And so now we've got our full formula here. Area equals 1/2. Our base is 14. So we can say 1/2 times 14 and then times the height, which is 5. And now we can just do 1/2 times 14, which is 7. 7 times 5 is 35. If that was a little too quick, then you can also punch that in your calculator And now we know that H, or 35, is the correct answer there. So that's how we do these coordinate plane triangle questions. We recognize them because we know that there is a coordinate plane. We know that on coordinate planes we don't use the distance formula. We know there's a better way to do that. So that's what we do when we're solving questions like this. So the big takeaway here is that we need to identify all of our specific high priority question types and then have drills to practice recognizing and solving those question types in the most efficient way possible. I always say that by the time you get to the real ACT, you should be in a situation where you don't even have to think twice about a question when you see it on that test. You should be able to read the first half of that question and already know what the second half of that question is going to ask, and you should know what exactly you're going to do in order to solve that by the time you do finish reading the second half of that question. So to put this into just a couple action steps that you can follow to make this nice and easy for you. First things first, if you haven't already, you need to identify your baseline score and your target score on the ACT math section. You should do this by taking a diagnostic test or just a diagnostic math section. And then from there, you can go in and identify your high priority areas, and then you want to create drills to practice solving them in the most efficient way possible. And now that's pretty much it for the math section here. If you're interested in more ACT tips on not just the math section, but the entire thing, then check out some of my past content here on YouTube and go over to Instagram and check that page out as well. I do respond to all direct messages there, so message me on Instagram if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.